Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick.
My first guest is the Managing Director of the Cara Pharmacy Group and a former Dragon from Dragon's Den, Ramona Nicholas. Ramona, I've invited you on to this week's Business Matters to celebrate International Women's Day. This year's theme is Press for Progress, but in your opinion, do you think that women are achieving the progress which they deserve?
I definitely think that there has been a huge amount of progression, even in the last 12 to 18 months, Karl, in terms of women progressing within the workforce, and not even that, also in female entrepreneurship alone. You know, from my perspective, having watched my peers and seeing other colleagues out there doing things that maybe they wouldn't have done, give it 3-5 years ago, it's really, really inspiring to see that happen. And, you know, women look to other women for inspiration, and it's just, you know, I do think that there is progress happening there. There's still progress to be made, but definitely I think 2018 is a good year for women in business.
Now, with the World Economic Forum 2017 Global Gender Gap Report, findings tell us that the gender parity is over 200 years away. There's never been a more important time to keep motivated in this respect, but what do you think that the Irish government need to do to help this along?
Well, personally, Karl, like if I was to put myself in a position where I was working alongside someone that was male and was doing exactly the same job as me, and I wasn't getting paid exactly the same, and I know obviously in different companies there is, you know, salaries aren't discussed and things like that, but you know, there's legislation around minimum wage and there's legislation around maybe salary brackets within the public sector, you know, in the private sector as well, that there should be legislation with regard to, you know, to salaries for obviously that parity that you're talking about in terms of female and male discrepancies in terms of how we're paid for the exact same job that we're doing. You know, that's something that I feel really strongly about. I don't see why there shouldn't be legislation in there to make that very clear and make it very transparent.
And from your experience, stereotypes, they can be an issue across many industries. And your own industry, the pharmacy industry, to be fair, it's mainly females that are employed in that particular sector. Should more be done to challenge that stereotypical approach?
Absolutely. Like, I never would have ever liked to think that something like that would put someone off from entering a certain, you know, and it's not even, you know, the stereotype even of a female versus male. It's also age. You know, that's something that we've come across in our industry where people, you know, and that's diversifying away from what we're talking about, but age is something also that people can be affected by in terms of, you know, going for certain positions within certain industries. Yes, I wouldn't like to think that it would hold anybody back. That's something that, you know, if it is a major issue, I think it absolutely should be addressed, but I would like to think that it doesn't. I think that we are very, from our perspective, I think it's very, very important to have males within our industry as much as there is females. Yes, not as many males apply as you would necessarily like at any given time, but, you know, it's very, very important to have that diversity.
And Ramona, do you believe that more can be done in Ireland to celebrate women's achievements?
Well, I think it's very much, Karl, up to women celebrating their own achievements as well and having the confidence to do that. You know, I think we have progressed so much, and I think the most important thing from my point of view is women helping other women and women being inspiration to other women as well, and being able to act as coaches, as mentors, as, you know, just putting the hand out necessarily because you've achieved something doesn't mean to say that you're any better or, you know, that you don't necessarily have the same flaws as anyone else is starting out. So, you know, to be there to help other people that are just starting off in the rungs of the ladder, I think is, you know, imperative for, you know, people that have maybe had 10, 15 years of experience of running their own business or whatever. And I think that's maybe what us as women should be focusing on more, is actually empowering other women as well.
Now, you became self-employed as a newly qualified pharmacist at the age of 23. Was confidence an issue for you at the time starting out?
No, and it's something when I suppose I'm speaking publicly, Karl, it's something that I always tend to hone in on, is the fact that I very much had youth on my side. Like we, you know, I obviously run the business now with my husband. We weren't married, we weren't even engaged at the time. There was no commitment there, and I suppose it's one of the biggest risks that I ever took in my life, which was going into business with someone else, and having to actually then scale that business. We went from 200 managed stores, which I knew was not for me, to jumping from 2 to 7 within a year of going into business. So, and we personally had to go to 9 different banks to get funding for that actual transaction and progression from going from, you know, 200 manager pharmacies to a group. And there must have been confidence there somewhere, whether it didn't come across, but I definitely think the fact that I was younger, doing it now might be a little bit more difficult because I feel I have so much more to lose.
And Ramona, in your personal opinion, why aren't more women starting businesses?
I think more women are overall, and I can see that. And I suppose it's maybe because I'm very interested in the whole subject and the whole issue around women starting their own businesses. But I think sometimes just getting that funding or getting that startup, but can be the the little bit of thing that holds people back. And maybe it's not something that they thought about when they're younger, but whenever they've got a little bit older, maybe in their 30s and their 40s, whatever, they tend to think, okay, I'd love to actually do this. So that's the things that I would like to say, okay, I'd love to start now, but there's that feeling, just as, am I right to do this now? Should I just stick with what I'm good at? I'm earning an income doing this or doing whatever. But it's to push yourself outside those boundaries, and I just think that's what's really important, is actually, if you feel in your gut that you can possibly do something, and I think we need to trust your gut more. If you feel that you can do that and actually start your own business, like, what is holding us back? Nothing. At the end of the day, if you want to do something, you can achieve it by any means. And that's something that I'm a massive believer in.
And through your appearances both on The Secret Millionaire and, of course, Dragon's Den, you've become a role model yourself for women right across the country. But I'm wondering, when you're out at business events across the country, what is it that women are saying to you that's holding them back?
Do you know what? If I'm entirely honest with you, Karl, whenever I speak at my talks, I tend to be exceptionally honest about my journey and what has held me back and what has, I suppose, pulled at me and maybe just held me back from pushing myself that a little bit further. And having children has been one of the main things that I would say, without a doubt, is something that not held me back, but what I'd say is that guilty mummy syndrome, that you just feel that you need to be both. You need to be everything. You need to be there for your family, and you need to be there for your kids, and you need to be there for your spouse. And that's just something that I feel, holds us back in general as, I suppose, and I agree when people say that, and I be honest with them and say that's exactly what held me back. And, I'm not going to explain the different reasons now, but, I'd be very honest with what happened to me at different stages in my life, and why there were stalls and why things progressed and didn't progress at different times. And, women appreciate that honesty, and I suppose actually a lot of the times be shocked by that honesty. So therefore, what I find very good is the Q&A at the end, and people do come up to me and say, do you know what, I actually really appreciated your honesty on that issue, because that's something that I'm actually struggling with. That if my son, daughter, whatever, needs to go to the dentist or I have to take them to the doctor, it's me that has to take the day off work, or it's me that feels, it's not even necessarily that they have to, but that they feel that there's a conscious decision there that you have to be the one that does it. And if you don't do it, you feel guilty about it.
And Ramona, how have you dealt with those thoughts?
Yeah, it's something I struggled with, Karl, for a long time. As I say, I'm being entirely honest with you. It's something that, I struggled with for a few years. When I had my first son, Alex, 8 years ago, 9 coming in May now, and it's been documented, obviously, that I had difficulties having Sarah, which is our second child, and it's just turning 2 in March. And, all these things, I think because we're women, as you said earlier, we tend to overanalyze things. We tend to, overthink things sometimes. And I did that. But what I had to do was, right, stop. This has to stop. I have to stop feeling guilty. I'm entitled to, I didn't take a maternity leave, for example, with Alex at all, and that was something I regretted massively. And I took 2 weeks, I've even took 2 weeks, when I got out of the hospital, I was back on the computer, and that's just absolutely ridiculous. And I was so much younger then when I had him. When I had Sarah, I took my 26 weeks, and that's only 2 years ago. But I mean, I had 6-8 years of experience behind me, and I felt stronger that I was able to actually make that decision. And that's something, that I would love to empower younger women that have kids with, is that, take the time out. If you feel like you want to take the time out, trust your gut. And that's what I've essentially ended up doing, is trusting my gut and not feeling that I had to prove something to someone else. It's proven to me what I'm doing right, and that I'm making the right decision for me and for my own kids, and that I'm showing the right example to them. And once I got those thoughts processed in my head and made a reason with them, rather than wondering, what does this person think, what does another person think in the industry, or what does this person, comparing yourself constantly to others is something that you do when you're younger. And thankfully, that's something that I don't do anymore, whether that is through my own rational thought process or whether it's through just getting older, I'm not sure, but that's something that I've totally stopped doing, and that is something that has really helped me personally in business.
This is exactly what this morning's programme is all about, Ramona, and for any lady that's listening to this morning's show, what advice would you have for them?
Well, what I would say, I had this master plan, Karen, in my head, like, as, what I was going to do and when I was going to do it, and you know what, it never works out that way. And, you just have to trust the process and trust your gut, and not to leave the guilt behind, and understand that no matter what happens, you're always going to be, if you want to go out to work, you're going to be, and start your own business, it'll be a perfect example to your children growing up. And, that, they say, like, I know my older son, Alex, now has that understanding that Mummy goes to work, and that she goes to work for a reason. And I always explain that to him as to why I have to go to work or why I'm not there at certain times, just as much as his daddy has to, as well. And it's important for them. Well, I feel it's important for the likes of him, especially as a boy, to understand that it's not just about daddy going out to work, or it's not just about daddy doing this in the evenings or whatever, that it's mummy doing things as well. And, that he should respect women in the same way as, he would respect himself or his sister. And to give advice or to say words of what I would tell my former self possibly, and that would be just to, just do what you think is right, and not to use any stereotypes, as we talked about earlier, or not to compare yourself to what others are doing. Just trust your gut, because if you don't do that, and that's what I have made several mistakes on, and I talk about that in my talks, where I have not trusted my gut, and I've gone against what my brain has told me, and those have been the mistakes that I've made in life.
Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick.